Something really trendy to talk about today, if you're in college, if you're of college age, if you're a millennial, to cut to the chase, is climate change, global warming. You know, this subject's relating to the human impact on the weather patterns. And I know that just by kind of phrasing it this way, framing it with this kind of tinge of incredulity, a lot of people that would see this video now are already discounting me. Oh, this guy can't possibly be educated. He can't possibly know what he's talking about. He hasn't heard what the scientists are saying. That's the phrase. The scientists, with quotes, but they're really talking about Bill Nye. The, who are these scientists? Can anybody name a geologist or a meteorologist today that's, in the field and doing research, drawing scientific conclusions through employing the scientific method? Can any of these people that are constantly alluding to the scientists do any of that? I mean, this video isn't going to be about me totally discounting and denying climate change, but for people that do want to do that, that's a great question for you to ask your interlocutors. They start going off about, but don't you know, and then you ask them, oh, so who is it that you're reading about? Which geologists research have you been reading? And if they're which meteorologist or what have you, and if they say like Bill Nye or they say Tom Skilling, you can promptly pee on their shoes. You have my permission and the blessing of the world. Anytime I start talking about this stuff, I always come back to this book that I read a few years ago. It was called The Story of Earth. It's pop science. There's no large numerical, math-heavy graphs in it or anything. It's framed in a way that's going to be easily digested by a layman. And that's just fine. That's more than a lot of these people have read. But what always jumps out at me when I go back to thinking about it is, looking at the way the chapters were named. Chapter 1 is birth. That's the accretion disk swirling into a sphere, the Earth. 2 is the formation of Earth, Then 3 through 7, they got different color names for, black Earth, blue Earth, gray Earth, living Earth. Living is a color. And red Earth. They've also got this white Earth and green Earth chapter in here, So what that makes me think is like, oh, okay, so apparently climate has changed in such a profound and tremendous way over the course of the Earth's lifespan, all these different times, that it completely changed what the appearance of Earth would have been from space. We had a period where it was a red Earth. What the hell is, I guess, heavy volcanic activity? A white Earth. I guess the whole thing was frozen. So the climate changes all the time, and in profound, tremendous ways, like humanity has not lived to see. It's just something that kind of happens. It's a part of the pattern. So, at the end of this book, there's the obligatory to all contemporary science books chapters about how we're destroying the environment. I swear, they stuff it into any book that you want to read today, a modern book about science. I got books about brain, the evolution of the human brain and the structures of the human brain. And there's a chapter in there about how we're destroying the environment. Like, what the fuck? Why do we need this in here? At any rate, it's funny because, this guy throws this thing at the end when everything that I read up to that point is kind of getting me to think, well, hey, it seems to me now like the climate changes and there's just not a whole hell of a lot that we can do about it or even have to do about it. It's just something that's going to happen. Because think about what we're saying here. Worried about climate change. We're worried about climate change that would be deleterious to human life. At least that's the ostensible claim, even though a lot of these millennials complaining about it are like so totally misanthropic. It's almost like, well, what do you care if it hurts humanity? You have so much respite for the species, you should probably not give a damn. And maybe you're saying it hurts the earth as a whole. They're worried about all the fuzzy little animals and stuff. Okay, sure. We're saying that it's bad for life on earth, what we're doing. So my next thinking is, how can we know that? How can we know for sure, understanding that the Earth's climate has always changed, has always gone through these transformations? How can we know with absolute certainty that what's going on today is any better or worse than what would have happened naturally without our, interference? And then another, how can we even not have interference? But that's neither here nor there. Really, that's getting into the gaps a little bit too much. Because let's think about it though. Everybody has on their phone that weather prediction app. Just about everybody. It tells you what the weather's going to be like tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, 3, 4, 5 days out. It's great. It's real useful. I'd say everyone would agree up to a certain number of days. I'd say maybe like right around, depending on where you live, it's obviously going to be a lot easier to predict the weather in, say, the Mojave than here in Chicago. But, that weather app doesn't really know so super well 6 days from now, it would be October the 6th, whether or not it's going to be raining. It just doesn't. It could very well be raining on the 6th of October, and the weather app wouldn't know it. It can't tell. The accuracy is going to drop like that with each passing day. 20 days from now, it really has no idea what the weather's going to be doing. We have no way to know with absolute certainty what the temperature range is, what the wind speeds, whether or not there's going to be precipitation. We don't have sophisticated enough computing. So when you tell me that not only is humanity changing the climate, but changing it in a way that is most definitely bad, or at least worse than how it would have changed naturally, what you're saying, and this is what you're saying, this isn't, a leap of faith kind of thing. What you're saying is that you believe that these scientists can go back 150 odd years and retrocalculatively figure out that our impact from the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, has made things consistently worse. When they can't even tell you what the weather's going to be like 10 days from now. You're talking about 150 years ago, working with lesser data than we're able to collect right now. We really can't know if this is a worse situation. Even with all these hurricanes, even with all these natural disasters, we don't know for sure that this is the worst possible situation. We still haven't had anything that's impacted us as terribly as, say, like that 1816 year without a summer thing when the volcano blew up. And that's something else that, I only kind of want to throw it in here, even though I'll agree for myself that this isn't the strongest ever rock-solid, iron-tight argument. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when we were still burning way more coal than we do today, unless you're China or India, we were knocking down whole mountains to get at this coal, and then we were extracting this coal. We were moving considerable amounts of weight around on the surface of the planet. So something I always kind of touch on, and I would actually like clarity, but I doubt that I'll get it here. What if us knocking down one of those mountains, we took some pressure off of Yellowstone, and because of that, it didn't erupt? If Yellowstone had erupted, that would be a much, much, much worse situation, climate-wise, than what we have today. Maybe we saved ourselves. I know that that's kind of a weak argument, but it's still something to consider. All the different things that we've done, maybe some of them have had a quote unquote beneficial impact. We can't know. We can't calculate all the variables. We can't calculate all the variables well enough to predict the weather 10 days from now. So that's just the weather, and that's what everybody wants to talk about. But I never really seem to hear too much people talking about other things that we do that are so deleterious to the environment. I guess I'm kind of contradicting myself to say I heard this on the BBC, but I don't know too many people that listen to the BBC every day. You know, they were talking about recently, specifically plastic bottles. But they did mention the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in that newscast, and I never hear that mentioned. I see plenty of stuff in the news feeds and all over, like we're destroying the climate specifically. We're changing the way that the planet is retaining heat and releasing heat. I see plenty of stuff about that. But, like, the garbage patch stuff seems to be at the best of footnote. And that to me could potentially become equally profound. It could even affect the way that the weather is, because this is just a Texas-sized patch that we can see floating at the top of the sea. What about all the stuff sinking to the bottom? We might have a veritable mountain of garbage at the bottom of the Pacific. That could, I'd say, easily impact the way currents are flowing. It can definitely get into the food chain. What about the Gulf of Mexico? Every year there's 100 square more miles of just dead sea, nothing but jellyfish and algae because of all the agricultural runoff. Something that they mention in this Story of Earth book, I don't know if they call it this, but I like to call it this because it seems like a, cool handle, neat name. It's oxygen holocaust. There's so much ambient oxygen in the atmosphere that this normally quite volatile chemical element of oxygen is just stripping electrons from every available source, and it's essentially dissolving everything that's alive. We could have an algal bloom like that start pumping way too much oxygen into the atmosphere, like what we're kind of doing in the Gulf of Mexico right now, and before you know it, it's not global warming at all anymore. There's just a multitude of different variables that go into this, but people are just coughing up nonsense nonstop about global warming. What do you want to do about it? What are the real solutions? I'm hearing from some sources that the real geologists are saying it's too late now. We're already in the positive feedback loop, and this stuff is just going to happen, and there's nothing we can do about it. So to that end, shouldn't we be more working on stuff like geostorm than just trying to curtail our emissions? I don't know. I'm not saying I have a solution. I'm just saying that there's a lot of people who are, thanks to 2-minute YouTube videos on so-called science, espousing all kinds of nonsense about subjects that they don't understand. So I guess it's just, another day in the life